You spent countless hours in the garage with your dad. Now investing in that old car and working on it with your son reminds you of him. And his legacy lives on. Fund your passion with a low-interest home equity line of credit from Bank of Blue Valley.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, you found me. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing good. I love looking at your brand new office.
Well, I am at the brand new office. So I was just telling you guys in pre-show that I kind of feel like a mess because it's not my usual setup. And you know, whenever you change anything, especially when it comes to technology, it gets kind of crazy. Thank you for carrying the show for me last week.
I don't know about that. I think Ezzy Redwood did a really good job. But I think what really carries the show is our colors of Bank of Blue Valley and Burns and McDonnell. So we gotta love Big Blue. So our backgrounds changed, but you do such a wonderful job with design. It feels like the same thing.
Okay, so you have your Bank Blue Valley hoodie on, right?
I do, and it's always backwards because you
pulled the wrong side up. That's why. There you go. Those are really comfortable pullovers. See, we got all sorts of cool perks to this job. What else have you been up to?
Well, in between waiting for you to DJ some techno music with that beautiful speaker in the background, it's really just kind of the hustle and bustle of Kansas City. So a lot of people have travel going on. People have kiddos activities in the summer. And I got a 2 and a 4-year-old. So, I'm just focused on the show with Bank of Blue Valley and Burns McDonnell and all their growth. What have you been up to?
That's funny you say that. So I have we're in the new office. We moved to 2000 Vine last Friday. Mm-hmm. And so we're in the new office and we had because I love to pack everything in a couple of days, we had a new guy start today. And I said, we kind of have this where you can come to the office or you can work from home, whichever works best for you. And he said, I have a 3 and 4-year-old. I'll be working at the office. And so I was like, I know all about that. I mean, mine are teenagers now, but I know all my friends have little ones like you. That's got to be hard to work from home sometimes.
Yeah, it's we'll want the audience to chime in if they're a hybrid or if they remote or do they do whatever. And the funny thing is, to your point of like, I'll be like, hey, during the pandemic, like, why are you in the office so much? They're like, 4 kids. You're like, oh, sounds good.
Right.
Go ahead. You're like, didn't want you working too much, but I get what you're doing.
My kids don't bother me. They just want money, food, and to be ran places at this point, right? That's the only time they even talk to me at all. So, okay, listen, if you are watching, we want to know if you're watching from LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. And yeah, answer Scott's question. Are you working hybrid, remote, from home all the time, whichever it is? So, all right, you ready to bring in? Nobody's here to watch us. They want to see our people, our panel. So let's bring them in.
Very popular panel.
Let me pull up this music.
Love the music. Love it.
All right, let's go ladies first. Our first guest today is Jenna, Chris, and Mike. You guys know that music?
I love the music. I don't know why you don't love the music. It's catchy.
I play it for you, Scott, because it's absolutely terrible, but I know that you love it.
It's because you're so popular. You get in trouble with Facebook and YouTube. If you ever play a song people recognize without the copyrights.
Look at this. Ryan says he's viewing us from LinkedIn and he's working from home. Hi, Ryan. We'll turn up the sound. You got awesome rock music to listen to on this show like that. Thank you, Ryan, for letting us know. And thanks for watching. All right. Keep letting us know where you're watching us from. All right. Let's jump into this. I'm super excited. Jenna, who are you? What do you do? And how do you get to Kansas City?
Yeah. So, hey, everyone. Scott, Aaron, thanks for having me. Excited to be on the show. I'm actually a Kansas City native, born and raised here. Grew up in a small town on the Missouri side, and then now live in Overland Park, Kansas. So I was one of those people that actually went to school for HR. And there's a lot of people that have gone to school for different things and they found themselves down the HR path and they are equally as awesome. But I was one of those people that actually went to college for HR and have done that since my younger days. So I've worked for several family-owned businesses over the years, and I started to realize that, my passion was more of the small startup businesses. So as I got to talking with friends and family and just companies that I had made connections with, I realized that there was such a need for small businesses to have an executive level HR presence, but lots of times they didn't need 40 hours a week or they couldn't afford it. So I started my company, 8111 HR Consulting, and we work with small to mid-sized businesses, typically that 50 or under mark of full-time employees. And we help them with their day-to-day HR needs, whether it's onboarding, offboarding, recruitment, just general questions, employee relations. We do training and development. We're there to support them just as your HR person would be in your office. We're either just remote or we're just on site occasionally. So love what we do. It's been super fun, and it's really rewarding to work with these small businesses and watch them grow.
So Jenna, for context, you mentioned you work with a lot of companies that less than 50 employees. I know you work with larger organizations, but to give context, the recent employer you worked at, how large were they? How many different divisions did they have? Just so the audience knows that there's not a curveball that you likely haven't seen.
Yeah. So the organization that I left, they were a federal contractor, one of the largest construction companies in the Midwest. They had a little under 500 total employees, and then they had many other entities that were also within the construction realm that had anywhere from 50 or 100 employees. So my team at that time, we serviced all HR needs for all companies, and they can continue to grow and do very well. And it was one of the main pieces of my career that gave me a lot of energy and want to go out and from the work that I did to really start to service those small size businesses. So I've seen it all. And we have currently been working with a client where, they have some extensive HR needs. And so we're servicing as a partner to their HR department as well. So we can step in and help with projects because us HR folks know that we can get really overwhelmed. There's a lot on our plate, especially with everyone needing talent right now, that sometimes things like your handbook slips away, or there's a policy, or it's performance reviews. My team can step in and have some supplemental help for those organizations as well.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
From the small business sector, what is one of the biggest mistakes you see small businesses make that really affect them down the line that they probably could have worked with someone like you on the front end and saved themselves a lot of money and headaches?
Absolutely. So onboarding is huge. So a lot of employers think, hey, we'll get them in here. We'll slap down this I-9 and this W-4, and that's the paperwork they need. And we'll send them off to do the work because that's what they're here to do. Essentially, they are there to work, but having that onboarding process, having everything ready, giving them the upfront information that they're going to need. They want to know, what is their PTO? What are the policies? What do they need to do here? What are the resources that are available? So taking some time to build out that onboarding process, whether it's digital or it's in person, is key. And there's studies that show that onboarding properly, up to 80% will help with retention efforts. So even if you're like, hey, I've got 7 people in my organization and we're going to bring in an 8th person, let's do onboarding right. Let's make them feel welcome and show them that you're ready for them. You're prepared. There's a training plan, and set them up for success from the get-go. One of the things that we've heard from organizations and then just through exit interviews is they say, I started, but I didn't have all the information and I didn't know who to go to. We help to supplement that so that way they feel like they have a resource in us, even though we're not there every day. We're just a phone call away, text message, Slack, all the wonderful digital channels if they have a question.
You don't need to say a name of a competitor if they do that, but I feel like that's really unique in people that do fractional work in your space, is really how you branded it on the onboarding side. So are there a lot of companies that do that, or is that kind of unique to what you do? And then also, would love to know how you came up with the name of your company.
Yeah. So there's a lot of awesome HR consulting companies. I champion them and they champion my business as well. We're seriously all in this together, and there's a lot of business to go around. I think what makes my company unique is that we consider ourselves an HR partner, and we want to fit in as we were an employee. We're not an authority figure. We're not coming in there slapping down the rules. We're giving you best practices, and we're working with your management team and just with your employees on whatever they may need. And we're happy to come on site. We're happy to be available. Our main goal is to make sure that our clients and their employees are taken care of, so that way those employees can take care of their customers. That's ultimately what we're here to do. And so the name of my company, 8111 HR Consulting, comes from actually my father and grandfather. I was very blessed to grow up in a family-owned business. It was a plumbing company. My maiden name is Henderson. So Henderson Plumbing from Raytown, Missouri, if anybody remembers that from back in the day. My grandpa started that company. My dad took over that company, and the location was 8111 Raytown Road, and that's where my grandpa's garages were for the business, and that's where his home was. So I spent a lot of time growing up there, swimming in the pool. They had homemade ice cream, and all those times I thought that I was just hanging out with grandma and grandpa and dad. I was learning a lot about how to grow my business and how to build trusting relationships, because I remember people would drive through and they would hand my grandpa a key to their home, and I would think to myself, well, we lock our doors. There's no way my mom would let me give a key to our house to somebody. Why are these people doing that? And I soon realized it's because my grandpa was so good about building trusting relationships that people ultimately handed the keys to their home to them. And so that's what I like, about my business is our goal is for people to hand the keys to their business to us with their people practices and trust in us that we're going to do everything we can to help them grow.
I have one more quick question.
Sure.
You made me think of this when you were talking earlier about, you said with PTO, small businesses. Is it, in your HR opinion, is it better to have a set PTO, set vacation, or do the unlimited vacation thing?
She's asking for a friend.
So I don't love the word unlimited. I like flexible. Flexible means that as long as you're good with it, if your supervisor's okay with it, business needs are being met, they should be allowed to have that time. One of the things that I hear employees say is, well, if we don't have a bank, then we don't take those days. We're not forced to take them. I don't know about you guys, but back when I did have a bank of vacation days, I still let them set anyway because I was so busy. I'd rather be able to go to the dentist or, go see my daughter or do whatever I need to do and not feel like I'm being dinged by the hour every time. So I personally really like that flexible vacation, PTO, sick time, whatever it may be, based on that person's needs. And as long as the supervisor and employee have good communication and business needs are met, it works out really well for small size businesses.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to change it to flexible. Look, Molly says, Jenna, I don't know how to say your last name. Can you say it one more time?
Eschenbrenner.
Eschenbrenner is an amazing resource. So happy to see you grow.
Oh, thanks, Molly. Right back at you. Molly is an amazing friend and resource as well to my business. So thank you.
Nice. Well, thank you for coming on. All right, Chris, who are you? What are you doing? How do you get to Kansas City?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Chris Stibbs, and I am a Omaha, Nebraska native. And I actually grew up coming to Kansas City for like weekend-long trips with my family. So Kansas City was kind of like a second home. Just 3-hour drive down I-29. But I actually came down here to go to college at Rockhurst University, go Hawks. And I always kind of had a passion for the nonprofit sector and volunteering. But when you're growing up, they don't teach you that like you can have a career in nonprofit. You just think like, oh, I volunteer and then I go into whatever my full-time job is. So I was really immersed in the social services realm at Rockhurst. And I work right now as the director of philanthropic engagement for Newhouse, which is Kansas City's first and oldest domestic violence shelter. But it was actually at Newhouse, at Rockhurst that I discovered Newhouse. I stumbled across a brochure. I had like 40 brochures in front of me that I was organizing for a nonprofit speed networking event. And I picked up the Newhouse brochure, and in a very privileged fashion, I did not know much about domestic violence. And so I had decided, I think I may need a couple volunteer hours for school. So I'll look into Newhouse and kind of get a couple hours done and then kind of move on. And fast forward 9 years later, I've worked for Newhouse twice. I started as a volunteer. I was on their Young Professionals Board in between working for them. So something I knew very little about became a huge passion of mine. And so I'm excited to be back today serving in this fundraising role where I get to work with individual and corporate donors and plan all of our special events. Scott and Aaron, I know you both have attended Newhouse events before, so thank you. And what I love most about my job is I get to tell stories. I get to share empowering stories from survivors who have gone through our programs and their courage and their bravery and everything they've overcome, and why it's important to invest in the mission of Newhouse and why we need to invest in the stories of survivors. So I've had a great opportunity to do this work and connect with the Kansas City community, and I love it.
Okay. I don't know if we've ever met in person, but I will tell you, I want to circle back to the event. I feel like, I don't know if it just got more on my radar or what, but now I feel like everywhere you look, you're hearing about these Newhouse events. Like the Newhouse events have really popped in these past couple of years. And I'm imagining that's kind of when you took over the event space, right? Because that's when I started seeing your name everywhere. So I guess kind of what was the how are you making that happen all of a sudden, which is good, right? Because you guys are getting a lot more funding. I would imagine that leads into a lot more funding when you have these great events and more brand messaging out there. So kind of, I guess, where is that experience coming from? Because there's a lot of people that could learn that event space from you.
Yeah, so I've always been passionate about events. The joke in nonprofit is like less events is more. And I'm like, let's do more events. And I've always just, I call it like experience planning because it's all about the experience at an event. Like we have thousands of fundraisers in the city every year, and there's a lot going on, and it's what experience are you creating that makes people want to be there? We were excited in March to launch our first ever pop-up bar, which is something I had no idea a nonprofit could even do. But the idea behind it was we wanted to create this fun, innovative event that was outside your normal gala or breakfast, which we host both a gala and a breakfast, and create an opportunity where you don't even have to know a ton about Newhouse to go to a happy hour for a couple hours and learn about healthy relationships. And the whole theme was around healthy relationships and loving oneself and just creating a space where you could thrive. So our mission was just to create these new opportunities and new experiences where everybody who walked through the door, the moment you walked in, you knew the mission of Newhouse, you knew what we were about, and we gave you tangible ways that you could get involved, even if it was just having a conversation about healthy relationships with a loved one or a friend or somebody in the business field. So I've been very honored to be a part of a great team. We have an awesome CEO, Courtney Thomas, who I know has been on this show multiple times, and really just have been working hard the last couple of years to create innovative and creative programming where we're truly tackling the barriers that people are facing when trying to leave an abusive relationship, and also helping the community understand ways that they can connect. So it's been a very, very great experience.
Yeah, Chris, I didn't know that Newhouse was one of the first in Kansas City. And then one thing I want to dovetail into, but the first question is, how many people at Newhouse that are staying with you? What's the breakdown of adults and children? But then also, I know it's a different segue, but you mentioned 9 years from when you started volunteering, and kind of adding on to Aaron's question is you kind of really hit the ground running. What was your experience or networking before that allowed you to have a base of followers and Chris that you were able to bring to Newhouse? So breakdown of who stays there, and then how are you able to really hit everything in stride?
So when I started as a volunteer, I knew nothing about domestic violence. We are serving 88 men, women, and children. At the time, we were just a facility for women and children. But some of the things we pride us on, we were one of the first shelters to house individuals who identified as transgender in the early 2000s. So we were housing trans women when there wasn't a place for them to go in the city. And we were also the first shelter to house men in the facility versus trying to refer them to hotels or homeless shelters. So nowadays, most of our demographic is adult women, but I believe last year about 45% of our residents were children, and they're typically, I think 1 to 2/3 of them are under the age of 12. So we serve a lot of little kiddos, but we have wraparound services that are both serving adults and children and families as a whole. So when I started out in the advocate's office, answering the hotline, doing intakes, it just opened my world up to what was going on. And I knew, like I said, knew nothing about domestic violence. If you'd asked me how, if I knew anyone, I would tell you no. But as the years would progress, more and more people would come out of the woodwork, family members, friends, people in the business field. And I realized I was surrounded by survivors all the time. I just didn't know it, because survivors are often isolated or they're silenced. And so that's when it kind of became my own personal mission. I remember sitting there with a little boy. He was 5 and he was reading a book to me, and he's reading the book and he just goes, "Yeah, my dad hits my mom." And then he keeps reading. And I'm sitting there frozen. I'm a 20-year-old college kid. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if this little boy grows up thinking this is what healthy relationships look like, how many kids out there are growing up thinking the same thing? And it kind of it was a switch for me where I was like, this actually might be what I need to do. So any of my friends can speak to it. I never shut up about Newhouse. I'm always talking, always on. No matter who you meet, there's always something they can learn from this. So I've always been a networker. It runs in my family. My dad has his own small business. I was always connecting with people. And as I would connect with people, more people would share their stories. And in a way, it was therapeutic for them to get involved, for them to share their stories sometimes for the first time. And it's one of those things where you don't have to be a big donor to talk about domestic violence, to talk about healthy relationships, to speak up. Because when we all speak up, people don't feel as isolated. So I just continue to grow my network and my friends, and have found ways to tie them into this mission. And I've been very fortunate to have lots of good friends who invest in Newhouse and invest in helping eradicate domestic violence.
Okay, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole when I ask this next question. Okay.
Yeah.
But part of my job is staying on top of what's trending out on social media. Did just the conversation in general, the trial in general, you know where I'm going, of Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, did that help the conversation around domestic abuse, or do you feel like it hurt the conversation around domestic abuse from your point of view, which I think it's much different than probably social media's?
Yeah. Domestic violence is a multifaceted issue. There are lots of behind the scenes things that people don't say or see. One of the things I will comment on, neither one party or the other, what people look like to the outside world oftentimes can be different what it looks like inside closed doors. We see a lot with survivors where, the abuser is this personable person that everybody loves, very well connected. No one could ever imagine that they, regardless of their gender, would ever do anything like domestic violence. But behind closed doors, they're a separate, completely different person. I think there were things that were highlighted that are important around domestic violence, but I also think as we continue to learn more about the trial, and obviously it's over now, there are things that hurt the movement too. And this trial proved that it's not always black and white. It's not always a clear cut, this person is guilty, this person is innocent. I think there's so much more that goes into it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. Yeah, that's why I was like, let's not go down a total rabbit hole, because I'm sure we can probably go to drinks and have a whole conversation.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to see. Let us know. I know you have a ton of people probably watching, so make sure you're commenting over here. Mike, we're going to jump over to you. Who are you? What do you do? And how do you get to Kansas City?
Aaron and Scott, thanks for having me on. I am born and raised in Kansas City. Grew up in Leawood and basically bleed crimson and blue. So after I graduated from Blue Line North, I went to KU, 5th generation KU, and made it into the business school and graduated with a business finance degree. And then from there, you would have thought I went into finance or work for a bank, but I ended up actually doing sales for an envelope manufacturer for about 11 and a half years. And fast forward to my life, got married, had a few kids, and I was working a lot of hours and not having the best work-life balance. So on Halloween of 2018, I walked out of the office, put in my resignation, called my wife. I was like, hey, I quit my job today. And she's like, what? What do you mean you quit your job? Because at the time she was a stay-at-home mom taking care of our 2 children. And she's like, I support whatever you do. And so I kind of took a look in the mirror and wanted to see what do you want to be when you grow up kind of moment. So I took a pause, met with various people from different industries. And, I kept thinking in the back of my mind, I've got 11 and a half years selling in the printing and mailing business. Do I want to start over completely new, or do I want to leverage all the relationships that I've built over the years? So in 2018, at the very end, I decided to start Stephenson Group, which basically leverages all the stuff I did before. So we're basically a boutique envelope brokerage that I run out of my house. I've got several different manufacturer partners all over the country, and I'm strictly wholesale. So I'm selling to printing companies, paper companies, brokers, mail houses, people like that. So I have never heard the Dunder Mifflin joke ever, if you're curious.
Yeah, I know. Mike, what are some of maybe the misconceptions or people that we may not realize are heavy users of the products and services that you sell? And then also when we chatted, we were talking about, what made you kind of the most nervous when starting your own company, and how the pandemic, factored into that, as an entrepreneur. So, what are some of the people that may, just as an education on your industry that are heavy users? And then also for you as an entrepreneur during the pandemic, what were kind of the ups and downs of that?
Yeah, no, those are great questions, Scott. Yeah, I'd say in terms of the scariest thing starting from scratch was I didn't have a non-compete at my previous employer, so I knew I was going to have a runway of being able to call on people that already trusted me, purchased from me previously. But, no one saw that we were going to be running into COVID and a pandemic, which shut down everything. So businesses weren't open. A lot of mills that actually produced the paper that envelopes were made out of shifted their capacity to corrugated. You think of people staying at home, you've got Amazon and Walmart, all these people are ordering stuff to their homes. There was no demand for basically paper-based products because everyone pulled all their marketing money back. So obviously the unknown, the first thing you're going to pull is marketing dollars, which is actually a mistake because if you're not top of mind with your clients, you're not going to be in front of them like your competition. So I'd say that was the scariest thing. And really in terms of the printing business, I mean, it still hasn't recovered from all the mills shifting their, capacity to more profitable stuff like corrugated for boxes and packaging, the stuff that is really growing. I mean, in terms of postcards and envelopes and things like I do, it's kind of a declining market, but there's still a huge need and a huge market share to fulfill that. I'm basically a tiny piece of the pie, a speck on the radar, but what I bring is my knowledge of 15 years being in the business and knowing where to go for what when there literally is no supply. How do you make the impossible possible? And that's really what I do day in and day out.
Aaron, you probably love that question on marketing.
No, I agree 100% with him on marketing. But I do know that towards the end of last year, there was quite a big envelope shortage per my printer, and he had pre-bought because he's been in the industry forever. But he said these are kind of where we need to stick in when we're doing like different event type stuff that required envelopes. Has that envelope shortage? Do you see it? Has it kind of gone away, or do you see it continuing through the rest of this year too?
I don't know if I'd call it an envelope shortage. It's more of a paper shortage. There was a strike in Finland for a lot of what people don't know is a lot of the paper that we use domestically is actually from abroad. We're big importers of foreign sheets for whether it's a catalog that you get in the mail for Gap clothing or it's a direct mail piece. It all derives from paper from a mill. So in terms of that, we're still dealing with labor shortages. We're still dealing with the fact that the mill shifted to more profitable stuff. So I don't really see them shifting capacity back over to fine paper and that kind of stuff, just because why would they? I can't blame them for wanting to shift capacity to more profitable stuff. And in terms of when is it going to get better, I'd say probably not till the end of 2023 at minimum. So what we're seeing in our industry is where people had the aptitude to, you knew that you had an event coming up. Well, you'd call your printer a week or two before because there was no issue. Now, if you've got an event in December, that's having to be planned now, which is, whether you've been in the business 50 years or 10 years, no one's ever dealt with paper allocation and the shortage of paper and labor and capacity across the board.
Yeah, I was going to say Mike's way too honest, and that's why he's so great at his job. Because as a salesperson, I'd be like, "Well, they're talking to the wrong person. They should have been talking to my company." But no, that's a great answer, and also I think setting expectations for your clients and truly helping them. But I know Aaron absolutely loved the answer on the spending of marketing. And so how did you kind of dovetail? I guess in a lot of ways you're involved in the marketing. Did you just pick that up from being in the industry on putting on the gas when everyone's pressing pause?
Well, yeah, I mean, really, if you're not solving a problem, you're just another commodity, basically. I mean, like this is an example of a transactional envelope, which is a commodity. It's all about price. How do you add value? How do you stick out when one of you gets something in the mail? This would be an example of something that sticks out. It's from Capital One. It's shape-based mail. It's got foil. It's fancy. It's on a nicer paper. It's really about how do you add value? How do you differentiate? I mean, what does it really matter at the end of the day of what something costs if you're getting a justifiable response on that marketing dollar? That's really what it's about. So,
well, I agree with you on all things marketing. There were a lot of, I feel like my clients that are thriving now are the ones that called and said, let's put our foot on the gas pedal right when COVID started. Like more people are watching now. And my clients that pulled back are kind of struggling now. And it's 2 years later from lockdown. So if you hear anything today, you hear Mike talk about marketing and how you should put your foot on the gas pedal. All right, time for our Burns and McDonnell question of the day. I'm going to play this video, and then Jenna, you can answer the question right afterwards, and we'll go in the same order. Here we go.
My name is Raheem Pree. I'm an electrical engineer here at Burns McDonnell in our oil, gas, and chemical global practice. And my question for you guys today is, how does your business define success?
That's an excellent question. I love it. So for us, with our clients, for success for us is actually getting our clients up and running, getting all of their standard operating procedures and HR practices in order to where they're able to function, well in their HR practices. And as much as we don't like to see people go, we love it when it's time for our client to say, hey, we're ready for an HR team and we want you to help hire and train them. That is success for us because we're going to continue to focus in the small business space. We hope all of our clients grow and become super successful and they're ready to eventually replace us and then we can turn into just friends. So or always be there to help on the strategic side.
From a success standpoint, I think you brought up onboarding, which is I don't hear a lot out of your industry on that, which is so crucial. I mean, they should just hire you just for that in itself. What other areas of expertise do you feel like are emerging or are rocking very successfully that maybe you didn't talk about?
Yeah, one of the high demands that we're having from our clients right now are to do what we like to call our interview and onboarding training. So onboarding there again, but we're finding that a lot of the smaller businesses aren't even quite sure on how to do a proper interview process, what questions to ask. We all have been in those interviews where someone has said, what is your greatest weakness, or what strengths do you bring to the table? We bring in different questions and we help our clients to actually understand the needs of their business. We put a process in place for interviewing, and that helps them to feel more confident in the interview, helps them to do a better job at getting those candidates, and it also helps with retaining those employees as well. We're also doing a lot in training and development on just making sure that our clients have their proper policies in place. So number one, we take a look at their handbook if they have one. If not, we help build that. Make sure that the policies are actually accurate for what they want. One of the things we see a lot of is people have policies in their handbook and we say, why do you have that policy if you're not really using it? They're like, well, we thought we were supposed to have it. Well, if you're not going to abide by that policy, let's not put it in there. So we'll go through that, and then we'll train management and employees on, what do these policies mean and how do we utilize them and how does it work for both the company and for the employees.
I have to tell you the coolest interview thing I just saw happen, and I love your feedback on it. I thought it was super cool. My partner just accepted a new job that she'll take in a couple weeks. She's already given notice, so I can talk about this on here. But she's moving over to KU, and in more of a corporate side job, and so she'll do presentations for groups. And so for the interview, they wanted her to do a presentation, but instead of doing something, they said they didn't want her to do something like they do because they would be focused on, and she hasn't learned it yet. So they said, just come in and do a presentation on a hobby you have, because we want to look at your presenting skills and how you work the room skills versus, the technical knowledge we haven't taught you yet. And I thought that was really cool because it got her really excited. She got to talk about something she was passionate about, which, KU will get her passionate about whatever she's supposed to be passionate about, right? But what are your thoughts? Do you see a lot of people do that? That's the first time I've seen it.
Yeah, so we're starting to trend that way. A lot of organizations are starting to ask people to do like actual on-the-job tasks. So that way they can, see, are they capable of doing that? What creativity do they have? What are they bringing to the table? And one of the things that I'm constantly telling my clients and want to share with everybody today is I hear a lot of like, well, we're looking for someone to come in and fit our culture. Really, you should be looking for someone to come in and enhance your culture. And you can tell a lot of that by how someone presents or giving them some kind of assignment that's not even necessarily like work related. It's not, signatory to that company, but you can tell a lot about that person by just having them do those tasks, and you can see where their passions lie. And that helps to enhance the company culture, because we have to understand our people and we have to see what areas they can engage in and they can make better for us, because isn't that what we're all trying to do, is better our organizations? Why not hire people that are able to come in and help us do that?
I love that. Well, she did hers on cricketing, like making things on the cricket, and she loved it. She got the job. So I
cool.
tell her I'm gonna start doing that.
Thank you for answering that. I was going to interrupt, but I didn't know if they would show up. I'm like, what was the hobby?
Oh, cricketing. Yes. We really like to cricket at my house. All right, Chris, what does success look like for you?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, success for us is watching a family move out of our shelter and into their own home. We have a family getting ready to move out, and one of the kids came up and said, we're moving, we're getting into our own place. And to watch them kind of, coming into Newhouse, they're rebuilding their home and what home means to them. And so to watch families move out into their own place and be successful and see a life that's free of violence, like that is success to us. I mean, we can look at fundraising dollars coming in and participation from donors and all of those KPIs that are really important. But at the end of the day, it's watching these families move out with their own confidence, realizing their own individuality and their own success, and seeing them move on into a place of healing that is their own. And knowing that Newhouse is a resource for them still. So families may move out, but they may still see their therapist or their case manager or use our early childhood learning center, knowing that they can just go out and it's the new chapter to their life. That's truly what success is for us. And it is the coolest feeling. And it's cool when they come back to visit and they share how great they're doing. And we see the kids grow up in front of us and go on to high school or college or get married. And it's this, it's an amazing feeling. It's an amazing feeling.
On average, how long is from getting there to them moving out?
Yeah, so we don't have a specific time length. The average right now is about 4 to 5 months, but we've had families stay for a week because they just need a place to go that's safe, and then they're on to their next spot. We've had families stay for a year or two. They have more barriers that we need to cross off and tackle. So it's recognizing and meeting people where they're at and knowing that what one client needs is very different than what another client needs. And it's not a one size fits all here. It's meeting people and adjusting to what best supports them.
Go ahead, Erin.
I'm sorry. I am so interested in this. How much of that transition is spent on the mental health piece?
Transitioning into the shelter or out of the shelter into their own place?
Out of just their overall transition from them there. How much is the mental health and getting them mentally healthy?
Mental health is such a critical component of our programming. I mean, when a survivor has experienced so much trauma, when kids have experienced so much trauma, there's a lot of work with mental health and therapy that needs to happen to ensure that we can reverse the impacts of this trauma. We know that we can't get rid of the trauma that someone has faced, but if we can reverse how it impacts them in life, how it impacts kids as adults, then we're moving in the right direction. We always say, the therapy we're providing for kids is kind of combining therapeutic practices and educational enrichment opportunities because our kids are often 18 to 24 months behind their peers. And when when a child has trauma and you send them into the school, it's like sending them in with broken school supplies and telling them to do their homework. It's very difficult. And so addressing the mental health is so critical because that's how people heal. They have to heal from the trauma they've faced. And if we don't, tackle it now, it can really affect them in the future. So mental health, from the moment they step foot into Newhouse, from the moment they leave and continued, mental health is a huge part of it.
See, you're asking all these great questions, Erin. I just have a selfish question for Chris about, Chris, I think it's easy to spot someone that is on a rocket ship trajectory like yourself personally. I mean, what are your goals? I think, you're younger but I feel like you're just destined for a lot of great things. What do you want to do or accomplish personally?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think someday, I reference back to our CEO, Courtney, who has opened doors for me to imagine things that I never could have ever thought I would want to do. And I think I would love to someday run an agency like Newhouse. I've had mentors like her and our chief development officer who have allowed me to kind of dream big and think of what I want to do. I am really passionate about housing. We have a housing crisis in Kansas City. We need better long-term housing for community members who are growing up in under-resourced and underrepresented neighborhoods. There is, and I will try not to go on a spiel too much, but there is a company in Austin, Texas called Icon Build, and they are the first company approved to 3D print homes in the United States. They're working with a nonprofit called News Story Charity, and they 3D printed the first neighborhood in Mexico City. And so I have this dream of kind of bringing that technology to Kansas City and 3D printing homes for community members who really need them. News Story Charity, who's this charity doing the printing, they have a really great phrase that says innovation and technology like this often gets to the people who need it the most last. And so bringing this kind of technology to Kansas City and adapting it based on what they're doing in Texas and Mexico City, I want to create this neighborhood where people have a space to go. And so that's one of my big dreams. But really just to help eradicate domestic violence, to talk more about healthy relationships and be able to be a part of taking Newhouse continually into the future.
Okay, I have one more question. We talk a lot about little girls being able to grow up and see themselves in spaces. My immediate thought when you said I'd love to run an agency like that is I've never seen a male CEO of abuse shelter. Is that something that you've been able to see, or do you think you'd be one of the first?
So Newhouse in its time, I believe, only had one male CEO, and he was an interim for about a year and a half. As far as the other shelters, I have not really seen a male CEO. One of the other ones, they have a co-executive director, which is male. But it's typically been a space that I think you've seen a lot of women in, which is important. Like for so long, the domestic violence movement was focused on women, as it should have been, because women experience domestic violence more. I think for me, it's important to go after this, but also do it in a way that is representative of those we serve as well. I think you tend to see, Caucasian men and women step into leadership roles, and it's not just a nonprofit, it's, in every industry. So I'm trying to be very cognizant about, I want to be a CEO someday, but also making sure that we're creating a space where, women and especially, women of color have a spot and our voices are at the table. And so it is interesting that you bring it up, because I have not seen a lot of male CEOs in this part of the nonprofit sector. I've seen them in other areas, but not so much in here. And I think as we continue to move and recognize that men and women and individuals who identify as non-binary, are experiencing domestic violence across the board, it's making sure that the representation is there for everybody in this space and kind of navigating that.
Well, listen, I haven't met you. I've heard about you, and I've heard you're very impressive. And I have to say, I agree, because this is the first time we've had one-on-one conversation. Well, this is kind of a one-on-one
question.
I really want to hear, Chris. So impressive. I'm so impressed. All right, Mike, what does success look like to you?
Yeah, in terms of in my business, I'm a professional problem solver, similar to kind of Scott's business on the insurance side. A lot of what I do is residual. So someone comes to me with, an envelope project they've got on their desk. Maybe it's for an event that I could be their last resort, but they come to me because they know I'm going to solve their problems. And in the printing and mailing industry, it's what have you done for me lately? And by coming through on that, solving that problem, they're able to get their, mailing out to their client on time and to all the recipients. And, assuming they get their response, that, the hope is they come back on the next one and they tell other potential prospects, how you came through for them. And I'm a firm believer that in business, it's all about relationships and communicating well and service. And that's kind of the backbone of how I do things. So,
Mike, Chris talked a little bit about something that made him really passionate in innovation for your industry. And for you personally, do you feel like what gets you really, really excited that maybe is new that people may not know about?
In terms of envelopes?
Yeah, I get I'm asking you a tough question, but when you were talking about the Capital One envelope, or maybe it's not new to you, but maybe it's new to us in terms of like what catches people. And, if you had an ideal client that their budget it didn't matter what it was. I mean, what grabs people, or what innovation is going on to really grab someone's attention? That's
a great question. My analogy of that is you got the red ocean, which is the commodity stuff. Everyone's fighting over, the big order for the cheapest price. It's a race to the bottom, and the only person that wins is the customer because they got it for nothing. But then you've got the blue ocean, which is kind of like the Capital One, like you said. Another way to define success for me is a lot of what I do, given I'm a one-man band, is I bring in the blue ocean ideas, the innovative, the colorful, creative, high-end, embellished finishing, whether it's soft touch or coatings, heavier paper. And given I'm wholesale, I'm relying on someone to show it to their client. So I'm kind of a layer removed, which is very difficult. But what gets me excited is when someone truly shows it to their client and they move forward with the project, because not just anyone can do these, the fancier stuff that really gets opened up and moves the needle and inevitably increases the response. So,
okay, I have an innovative print question. I mean, for envelopes, it's print/envelopes. Yeah. I want to get your feedback. The new printing capabilities that make it look handwritten. And so so it looks like you get a handwritten note on an envelope that like somebody would just send you, not necessarily a company. What are your thoughts on this? Because I'm struggling with them. I think they're so great, but every time I'm so mad at the company when I open it up and it's an ad.
You thought it was real.
I did.
That's what makes it so neat is technology is really, advanced with digital and more one-to-one communication where, so I get them all the time in the mail that people want to buy my house and it looks like a handwritten letter and I open it up. I'm like, oh, but they did their job. It's all
and
about.
If they're getting you and you're an expert in it, that's impressive.
And I dork out on that stuff. So.
Yeah,
but Mike, if they're getting you to do that, that's impressive. Sorry, Aaron.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm impressed too. But
technology and capabilities have come a long way in the 15 years I've been in the business. I mean,
so has that changed the envelope game at all? Because a lot of them look like the envelope you would get, like if you went and bought, like just I'm a person at the house sending envelopes versus like business envelopes.
Yeah, a lot of what I do is direct mail focus, so it's more colorful. It's more customized. It's not just your standard Office Depot envelope number 10. It's going to be colorful, a different size, and ultimately in the 10 pieces you get a day in the mail stream, which ones are you more inclined to open up? The boring ones or the, more embellished ones that are enhanced? That's kind of the way I look at it.
Nice. All right. Well, if they're tricking you, now I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, no, I thought that was like the best part of the theory. I was like, wait, they trick? That's what you do. But
that's what it's about. They want to get you to open it up. And inevitably, they hope you leave it on, your counter or something else. And when it comes time to donate to that nonprofit, well, you see how much money you have left at the end of the year, and they did their job. So.
All right, Scott, since I'm not at home, we're not going to play our sports game today. We have a sports game we play sometimes. So I'm going to let you do my least favorite thing that you love so much, which is an icebreaker question. Everybody has 2 minutes to answer because we've only got about 7.5 minutes left. So ask some dumb icebreaker, Scott.
It's coming. And so whenever anyone goes to an event, what they truly care about, not that there's not a wonderful speaker, they care about sharing. So I encourage everyone to do an icebreaker in your employee meetings or client meetings because all they care about is did they share. So Jenna, I'm going to copy out something you said earlier. You talked about having ice cream with your grandparents. Mm-hmm. I'd like you to channel back a little bit more, and you're going to be on your feet since I know you, I don't feel bad. But what is something else that you had as a child? Maybe that was with a relative or a grandparent. That's that nostalgic candy or food or pie. And why is it so special?
So my mom's mom, my grandmother was Lebanese and Syrian, and she always made special food for us. And one of my favorite things was called lahamajin. And it is essentially meat and onions and bread, if I wanted to make it easy.
Love it.
And it's amazing. And so I grew up learning to cook with my grandmother. My mom has taken that on. I try to do a good job, but I'm never going to be as good as they are. And so that's just something I always think back from my childhood was going to grandma's and just the smell of walking into her house and knowing that food was there. And that was the only time I was ever going to get it because she was the best at it back then.
Chris, dig back, Omaha. What was it that you just loved as a child and why?
Yeah, so I remember one of our family traditions was when my grandfather, he was very sick before he passed, and we used to always go pick him up a Goodrich Mall. Do they have Goodrich here in Kansas City? It's like an ice cream, kind of like an ice cream chain, but in Omaha. And they used to have these, I just remember these cups that they had that like you took to go with you, but like they were nice cups. So I was always wondering how they were just giving them out. Like it's probably why they're not really around anymore. They spent a lot on cups. And I always just remember us picking up malts for ourselves and then picking up a malt for him because that's kind of what he loved to drink. And so that chocolate malt from Goodrich is probably one of my favorite malts. And there's one particular location I think of every time when I drive by, and I don't think the Goodrich is there anymore, but I'll always just like connect it to my grandpa and having those malts. So that's probably one of my favorite childhood memories.
Is there any malt in Kansas City that's similar that ever reminds you of it? Just curious. Or is it more of that location and the place?
I think it's more the location. It's probably not even the malt, but like I do love a good like Betty Ray's malt. So that's probably that, or like Winstead's are two that are my two go-tos. So
I love when Jenna goes meat and onions and bread. Chris, Mike, and I were like, "Ooh, yeah."
Okay.
So, Mike, what is something going back into childhood or maybe traveling? But what was it when you were a kid that you really looked forward to, maybe with a family member or a destination?
As a kid, my uncle used to take myself and my brother and sister to Worlds of Fun. And on the way back from Worlds of Fun, we would always hit up Winstead's and we would get the big skyscraper. So back to the mall. And that was something we always looked forward to. Kind of the finisher of the night was we'd hit up Winstead's on the way back and, spending time with family and then having, getting to break bread. And then obviously the main event, which is the dessert. So.
What about the blacktop smell of World? Do you ever feel that nostalgic when you go the smell of blacktop? Do you think of Worlds of Fun?
Oh yeah, Worlds of Fun, Oceans of Fun, waiting in the long line, being miserable and sweaty. It's.
Did you see they're going to do time tickets now for the Mamba? Where you go get your ticket and then they tell you what time, so you don't wait in line because they're averaging 3 hour plus long line on that.
Yeah, they're getting with the times. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So, Aaron, what about you? What nostalgic do you? Is it a destination? Is it family? Is it someone cooking something?
God, we moved around so much. The only thing I could even think of there was when I was real little, the only thing we had in the whole town, I grew up in the mountains in Colorado, Granby, Colorado, was a 7-Eleven. So my cousins and I would walk there for slushies. But what I'm doing with my kids is our kind of special treat after things. If you go to Tio Cali restaurant, they have a fried Hershey's bar. And it's so amazing. It comes with ice cream. So whenever we're downtown, because we live like far south of Overland Park, they'll be like, "Oh, can we get that fried?" And so that's what I'm doing with my kids. How about you, Scott?
Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's called the Beltline Bar, and it is where they claim they invented the wet burrito, which is basically an astronomical amount of cheese on top of a burrito. Not healthy. I tell people from Grand Rapids about it. They're like, the Beltline Bar? And it's more of the, I think to Chris's point, the nostalgic, the location, the place. Kansas City, Hayward's barbecue, maybe not the best, but it's nostalgic in my family. So, I'm always curious. I'd love to ask that question when we have someone from Burns McDonnell or Bank of Blue Valley, the spot next to their offices. They have many. But would love to know their nostalgic spot that they like to eat.
Chris, out of curiosity, in Omaha, is that where you're from? Omaha?
Yeah.
Homie's Bar. Have you ever been there?
Is the Homie Inn?
Yeah, where they serve champagne on
tap. I love the Homie Inn. So I grew up just down the street from there. My first house as a kid was just down the street. Yes, I do like the Homie Inn. You would not expect that bar to have champagne on tap.
No, it's like the biggest dive bar. I was thinking about that when you were saying that.
Dive bar with champagne on tap?
It's so great.
Right.
Yes. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for coming on. Thank you, Scott, for co-hosting, and thank you, Bank of Blue Valley and Burns McDonnell, of course, for sponsoring. We will see everybody same time, same place next week. Until then, have a wonderful week. See ya.